Okay, it is Wednesday, I believe, April 22nd. My calendar's down there, so I know it's April 22nd, but that's, and this is Craft Class Lesson 2. The topic is passion. It is not a conjugal passion or corporeal passion, but one of the Thursday students wrote, and we actually did a podcast about it too. She wrote and said, I'm trained as a nurse and I'm just, in a sort of logistical get the facts mode, and I want to bring the passion back in. And would you do a class on that? So we did a podcast and a class on that because we have limited input, I guess. But before we do that, a reminder, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a whole menu there, and chat is the little dialogue icon. If you click on that, it'll open to it should be to your right, might be to your left. And at the bottom, it says type message here, and you can type anything you want, and it says to everyone. That's a drop-down menu in case you want to pass a secret note to somebody else, you can. But I don't know if passing notes in class is only slightly more encouraged than in a regular class, because at least it's writing, right? But we begin every week with a goals check-in. So we ended the last class setting a goal. The first challenge of the goals check-in is to remember the goal you set 2 weeks ago, or one, depending. And the first lesson of the goals chat is to set goals that are simple enough that they are memorable. So, we learn and grow in goals chat. And then the other thing we really, I hope we worked on this, is to set a goal that was very gentle and kind and small, because, it's always challenging to write. And then these are tough times on top of that. I was listening to a podcast interview with, I believe it was with Anna Napolitano, who wrote Dear Edward, which she's written other things, but that came out and got a lot of attention recently, and it's good. And she said she had something where she had to write, I think it was like 3 sentences, or, but it was one of those little small goals. And then she said, and then you put an X in your calendar after you've done it, and you just try to get that chain of X's. So the tiny goal, but I've done a lot. Like, I've had students who do 1 sentence a day and end up publishing a book out of that. But I love the X on the calendar. That kind of thing really works for me. You have to figure out what works for you, but and then just not wanting to break that chain of X's on the calendar. So anyway, go ahead in the goals check-in and let us know, if you remember your goal, what it was and what happened. And even if you don't remember your goal, you might think, did I write at all in between class? And did I want to? And how's it going? So go ahead and put that in the chat. And happy Earth Day. The Earth is very happy right now. The rest of us, not so much, but the Earth, yeah.
That was actually pretty. You could see the trees outside your window.
Oh, and I closed.
Yeah.
I know.
The sun.
It's really pretty. Here we have this beautiful flowering tree over here.
Yes, it was beautiful. And then the sunbeam is nice.
A little. As it darkens, maybe it'll.
Yeah.
It's actually all about to fall off.
Yeah.
You should see Cheryl's view, but she has a real desktop. She can't really, I don't think you can turn it around.
Yeah. This thing is weird, right? Because it makes it like I'm floating over something. And then I don't know why I'm crooked, but I decided to be a class in bed.
I decided that the backdrop thing on Zoom looks like, so Mira Jacobs, if anyone knows her work, she does kind of collage where she has a drawing, fix it on something, and that's sort of what
that is, right? So it's not eerie to you. When you're looking at it, it's not eerie. And plus, I'm too close.
It's not eerie, but it is definitely not super realistic.
No, it's very strange. I look out at treetops from my apartment.
Because you're up.
This is my ceiling.
We can't see. We see sky.
Oh, you can't see it. Oh, right, you see Sky.
Which is also metaphorically your ceiling.
I never get this technical stuff right.
All right, Aline remembers her goal to finish the UK section and get our main character into Berlin, which in World War II was not always a kindness, but we aren't kind to our characters. That's not the point here. She said she finished the UK section, yay! And this morning managed to get my main character on her journey to be a full-fledged spy. Very exciting. Things
There's everybody.
happening. We might need some distractions from the day after day in the house, right? Much more fun to go to Berlin. Felicia, goal?
Yes.
I'm just reading your goal. Goal, write, check in. Yes, I'm writing. That is the soul of simplicity. It's perfect. It's exactly right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Francis, goal was to finish my second draft, which I did. So hallelujah. That is really exciting. A month ahead of time. So I took a week off. And did you go anywhere exciting? Oh, Francis. But look, you have I bet there are you can turn and there's like things from all over the world right there in your house.
Memories.
Yes, exactly. But congratulations. That is really wonderful. And now she gets to do research, which is really fun, right?
Yeah.
Like the
rabbit hole.
Yeah. Oh, it says Angie, but it's really Cheryl. Here, I'll change it. Wait, here we go. Rename. All right. Cheryl. Okay. There we go. Goal is to write an hour a day, halfway met. That's awesome. The writing goal is half full. I'm gonna go with half. That's fantastic. And that's a really rigorous schedule. So I think to do half of that is great. Denise says, forgot my goal wasn't here last time, but I did write a little and managed to do more reading, so I'm not unhappy. That's all we can ask for. Coming to today was probably a good goal, and that's great. Writing and reading are gifts to ourselves, right? Yay. Jennifer says, I have no idea if I set a goal last time, and I certainly don't remember if I did. I'll set one now. You might have, did you leave it tiny bit? I don't know.
I'm sorry, what?
Maybe you left a tiny bit early or something.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't remember memorize other people's goals.
I did make the narrative, so I get some credit. That wasn't my goal, but I did it.
That's fantastic. Yay.
An I story.
Ah, good. Yeah, no, it's great. And we also, not to say that this is going to happen, but we definitely always celebrate rejections. And I find that my students who get the most rejections are the best published. So we always, so if you can collect rejections, which I'm bad at, as we can tell, but if you collect rejections, that's the way to go. And we definitely cheer them on. But submissions, even better, because who knows? We're in that wonderful Schrodinger's cat moment where we don't know the outcome. And Eleanor says, I said I would work on my cancer essay. I'm now in the 3rd round of revisions, getting closer. Fantastic. It's currently 5,600 words. Great. I mean, I think, do you have a word count goal, up or down?
Let's see, did I unmute?
I unmuted you.
Oh, thank you. No, I started out 6,000 words and then saw, as I fooled around with the tenses and put more of it in present tense, that there was some fluff in there. So I've been removing fluff and changing around the order, which then changes the word count. So
yes. All right, great. Sounds great. Next task, identify some outlets you might publish. Nice.
So the thing to say about this is this entire piece was written in the last round of this class.
Wow.
Entire piece was written session by session and then worked on in between and then edited again and now a 3rd time. So
I love it. Well, if anybody has recommendations for personal essay,
longer, it's on the long side. So
Throw those in the chat. Yeah, great. Catherine, I proposed writing 2 hours a day, I think. I wrote for a few hours total, but spent about 6 hours fixing structure. Well, that's great. And that it all counts as writing. That's the secret. You know, if you're editing your work, that counts. And if you're writing, that counts. And if you're reading it, if you're, you know, it all counts. The only thing, you know, that can get tricky is if you start counting, you know, submitting and things, because that can be so disheartening and disconnecting from the creativity. But any part of the creative cycle, 100% counts. So it sounds like you really met your goal. And one of the reasons that's important is because it's so easy to feel that whatever stage you're at is not the right one to be at. So if you're just early drafting, you think, well, if I already had a draft and I knew what I was doing and I could be editing, that would be more legitimate. But when you're editing, you feel I should be writing. It's really the writing that matters. I mean, you know, there's so many ways to make it not count. So it all counts. All right, great, Catherine. Bridget, goal must have been to open my book in a year file and write at least a half hour, not counting the read-throughs of what I've written. No, but now we do count them. Now we are counting them. So did you do some writing and as well as some reading?
Read through is editing, so yeah.
It counts. It definitely.
I have to do a half hour just fresh, like pretending it's a craft class prompt.
You can even watch the video.
Yeah, well, I go back to what I'd actually done and integrated the scenes into what I'd written. And my manuscript actually went from about, 11,000 to 20,000 words.
Wow. Well, then you must be writing.
I must be.
Unless you're copying and pasting from the internet, you must be writing. All right. Well, great, everybody. Let's dive in then to passion. Energy, emotion, rhythm, and vivid scene. And I will say we did hear from a couple of our number that just too much Zoom. And so they're checking out for tonight, but hopefully they'll be back. And I understand it's, you know, it's a very virtual world right now. So, but let's go into our own vivid experience, or that we imagine for our characters, and step away a little bit from all the virtuality. Okay, so I start with Dorothy Allison, who is wonderful. There's actually a podcast, the Tin House podcast. I think I'll put it in the chat in between, but she gave a talk at the Tin House writing workshops a couple summers ago on dialogue, and they just replayed it on their podcast recently. She's really fun to hear talk, and she has this great accent. And actually in the Thursday class, I asked Debbie to read this because she has a bit of her Southern accent still. Anyway, I won't do that or anything, but you can try to hear that Dorothy Allison voice, and you can kind of hear it in the rhythms of her sentences as well. And just a great place to start in terms of passion. So I will read it and then say a few things about it. Oops, let me just mute everybody for sound. Okay. And feel free to put any questions that come up, feel free to put them into the chat. I may not see them in the moment, but I will see them while you're writing, or if while you're writing something comes up, you know, you can put it in the chat. Again, sometimes it takes me a few minutes, but I'm here for you. Okay, so this is from a memoir called 2 or 3 Things I Know for Sure. Where I was born, Greenville, South Carolina, smelled like nowhere else I've ever been. Cut wet grass, split green apples, baby shit and beer bottles, cheap makeup, and motor oil. Everything was ripe. Everything was rotting. Hound dogs butted my calves. People shouted in the distance. Crickets bloomed in my ears. That country was beautiful, I swear to you. The most beautiful place I've ever seen. Beautiful and terrible. It is the country of my dreams and the country of my nightmares. A pure pink and blue sky, red dirt, white clay, and all that endless green, willows and dogwood and firs going on for miles. 2 or 3 things I know for sure, and one of them is the way you can both hate and love something you're not sure you understand. So one of the things I love here, and we've talked about this, it might have been last quarter, but it's come up repeatedly, which is um, the kind of the juxtaposition of something that can be both beautiful and terrible. Something that the flip that I think it's Niels Bohr said something like the opposite of a small truth is a falsehood, but the opposite of a great truth may also be true. So that kind of like the deep emotional resonant moments can contain opposite truths. And there's something really profound and vivid about seeing all those things. I think it was last quarter, but we had an excerpt from Ta-Nehisi Coates' novel, The Water Dancer, where he pulled details that were not themselves sort of the things we would associate with a positive feeling, but the character had a positive feeling, now had changed to have a positive feeling. So similarly, she's talking about the beauty of this, and she's bringing out, a real combination, a kind of kitchen sink, right? Everything and the kitchen sink combination of details. So one thing you might want to play around with is just mining all the details of something that they kind of, cluster together, and they don't necessarily automatically say beauty or terrible, but they can hold both. Everything was ripe, everything was rotting, and that line between ripe and rotting, between beautiful and terrible. She's also great with verbs. Hound dogs butted my calves, people shouted, crickets bloomed. And then color also, right? Could be pink and blue sky, red dirt, white clay, all that endless green. The specifics of the plants, for those of you who are gardeners, that's a great vivid, even for somebody like me who doesn't necessarily know, those words are very particular, right, and wonderful. And so that's something rich you can bring into the writing. So lots of fun stuff to play with. As ever, you go to the page with your characters, your stories, your memories, whatever pops out. The number one rule is you write and see what happens, and don't worry about any of this, but just use it as jump starts and permission. So let's do 8 minutes. Couple more minutes. Keep going. Okay. So I've put you in trios. And so we'll take about 4 minutes per person. I'll send you a little message when it's time to switch. So you read it aloud without apology. Remember, that's the other rule, no apologies. And then my new rule, the new thing I'm now calling my third rule is really the appropriate response to a brand new written rough thing that just came out on the page is positive, specific praise. Not positive. Praise is already positive. Honest, that's the word. Honest, specific praise. So you find what works and as specifically as possible. I loved that image. I was very curious about that character. That voice was interesting to me, right? Whatever is true and specific. And there's, first of all, everybody here can write. There's always something interesting or wonderful or inspiring or a spark to find and to note. And that's most of what we don't know about our own writing is what's working. And it's also most of what we can build on. So yeah, so it's fun. So I'm going to put you in the room. I will let you know with those little messages when to switch, and I will bring you back in 12 minutes. Is it not? It should just push you over. But, let's see. Oh, okay. I think it's going to happen. There we go. All right. Everyone will be back in 40 seconds. We'll just wait 30 seconds. We'll just wait for them to return. we have a few more seconds until everybody's popped back in miraculously. So we have a few people who aren't here yet, but they will be whisked through space and time, the space-time continuum, maybe. All right, there's everybody. So I unmuted everybody. Any observations come out of this writing? Anything about rhythm, voice, detail, opposites, or something else?
In ours, Jennifer had a woman sinking into a hot bath while there was on the other side, there was this meanness on the other side of the door as she begins to immerse herself into a hot bath. And yet over her head is crumbling ceiling. So lots of very good contrast of this relaxation and trouble and even something more ominous outside the door.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it kind of like each thing that you said, it was like, oh, right, the relaxing, like sinking into a hot bath, there triggers an emotion. Then like, oh, there's something mean outside the door, that triggers an emotion. The crumbling, like each thing triggers an emotion, and there's a tension between them, right? So you can feel that, which is story, which is not as fun in life, but really exciting story.
Yeah.
Great. What else? Anything come up?
I'll mention Denise's, which is in Denise's, she had the wonderful smells of someone who had once been a great cook, an elderly woman, in which the smells that were underneath these wonderful smells of the spaghetti sauce cooking is what I'm thinking, was mold and mildew, and a carpet that was worn with her steps as she walked back and forth as the years passed by. I mean, and that was 4 sentences, or she said it was 2 sentences, but whatever, it was 4 or less sentences, and it was profound.
And again, as you say those details, you can feel all the tensions in them. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Frances, were you going to say something?
Oh, sure. We had. Cheryl took us all to the big front porch of a cabin by the river.
Nice.
That was really nice with people lounging languorously.
Yeah, I agree, and it's such a universal American thing for the summer. Everybody goes to the cottage or the cabin or the something.
Yes.
Porch and
and again, it just takes us there. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Jennifer, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say on Felicia's piece, it was quite amazing the amount of character detail that she was able to pack in the middle of the beginning and end of her piece. I mean, it was just like you had this amazingly clear image of this guy and his history and why he might be the way he was, and and it was the fascination of ordinary life, I think she said in her piece, and it was like that, but all of the details came rolling out. It was really wonderful.
That is wonderful. All right, well, let's write some more, do some more of this good stuff. So this is from Euphoria. Thank you all so much. This is from Euphoria by Lily King. She has a new book out called Writers and Lovers, which is very different, but I enjoyed it. I love Euphoria. It's loosely based on Margaret Mead, but the character's given a different name and a somewhat different history. And this is 3 people, the Margaret Mead character, Nell, and her husband, and then the guy who's the narrator, who becomes sort of a love interest. But at this point, the 3 of them are together kind of writing up this theory. They're all anthropologists out in the field, and they're writing up this theory, and you can feel the kind of energy in it. So one of the things I wanted to capture for this topic of passion was kind of connection and excitement and the energy that can come of that. And so here it is. We kept at it. The sun came up and went down again. We believed we were in the throes of a big theory. We could see our grid in chalk on university blackboards. It felt like we were putting a messy, disorganized, unlabeled world in order. It felt like decoding. It felt like liberation. Nell and I spoke of never having felt aligned with our culture, with its values and expectations. For long stretches of time, it felt like we were crawling around in each other's brain. I just love that. So, and in the midst of sort of some language that's abstract but very kind of exciting, right? Decoding and liberation. But then there are these images like a grid in chalk on university blackboards and crawling around in each other's brain, and then kind of the sense of putting a messy, disorganized, unlabeled world in order, right? So they're just, and the rhythms of that, like there are no commas there. It's just, messy, disorganized, unlabeled world, and the throes of a big theory. The sun went up, then the image of the sun came up and went down again, right? So the sense of time moving, the action, the similes, just a lot of energy there. So maybe connecting with a moment where your characters are doing something that about which they are very passionate. And again, we see that it doesn't have to be, conjugal. What's the word? Corporeal. I mean, it is all bodily, but it's not necessarily sexual per se. And just to see like what is that energy and how can we convey that energy on the page through the rhythms of the sentences and the images and and even the energy of like trying to put it into words. It felt like decoding. It felt like liberation. And they're trying to put a theory into words, right? So we get to sort of be in there crawling around with them trying to do that. So tapping into a moment where or a group of characters are really excited. And I will say for next week, in the alternate week exercises, I put the whole scene, the whole end of the scene from Raymond Carver's Cathedral, where the blind man and the friend or the husband are drawing, and the line "we kept at it" or "I kept at it" is in there, and it triggered that for me. And it's a very similar kind of like this very intense energy. So that will be, you can kind of come back and remember this one when you do that one next week. But yeah, so play with that, with the energy of excitement, the passion of minds meeting or other kinds of great moments where it just feels thrilling, and how do the sentences capture that? And again, see what happens on the page. So let's do 10 minutes. Couple more minutes. Okay, let's hear some of these. Who would like to read? And again, just with the spirit of seeing what's on the page. Cheryl. All right, let's unmute you. Hang on. All right, let me unmute. All right, go ahead.
We were a column of ghosts stumbling across the dust-laden trails from Tenochtitlan to Tecua. From night to day to night again we marched, away from the fire and the screams and the companions we left behind. Our wounds, our clothes stuck to the drying blood in our wounds. We stumbled, we held each other up, we fell and we carried each other. That day, that night, no one was in Hidalgo. We were bloody and defeated, weary beyond time and space, barely conscious of marching. But we marched, unknowing and uncaring of our destination, as if our minds still lay there on the bridge among our dead, but our bodies had simply failed to fall.
Gorgeous. Oh, I love that ending. That's just such a beautiful evocation of that emotion of, of leaving the dead behind and yet feeling they're there with them. The names of the places, that's a perfect example of, I couldn't replicate them for you, but they're vivid and wonderful and they bring a lot of atmosphere. And then, the energy of like what they're marching away from, and then the vivid images of the clothes stuck to the drying blood and the stumbling and the falling and the kind of the rhythm of that also gives us a feeling for the marching, right? Like the rhythm of those different descriptions. Yeah, fabulous. All right, who's next? Aline. All right.
Her train journey from Paris to Berlin was the same and different from her journey from London to Arisaig. The same was her desire to look out the window at the landscape rolling past. The day was warm and sunny, too warm as the sun beat on the glass. When her compartment companions lowered the blind against the heat, she stepped into the corridor and stared out the large window at the scene before her. She was facing south with the sun directly in her eyes, but she knew as they slowed to have their papers checked at the French-German border that she wasn't that far north from Strasbourg. They'd passed through Metz and Lorraine, and they came to a stop just over the border in Saarbrücken. Even if she hadn't known where they were, she'd have known the terrain. She thought of her beloved Vosges. the terrain of her childhood, of her life, of her memories. She knew the paths through the trees, felt the boles of the trees as she weaved through them, turning, twisting, doubling back. It was easy to get lost in a forest, go in circles, never find a way out, but she was secure in her footing. She looked south but couldn't see them, not even in the distance. Even though they were only 100 kilometers south, the sun was too bright.
Beautiful. You know, I love how, again, these very literal images become so resonant with the whole situation she's in. The idea that, you know, it's easy to get lost in a forest and never find your way out, right? That feels like it's exactly true of what she knows from her childhood, and also symbolic of the situation she's headed into. And I think symbolism always and only works when the literal is very true to the moment as well, right? So we buy it completely on the literal level, and then but we see immediately, recognize that it applies in this deeper way. Same with the sun was too bright, right? So just there's that whole sense of getting lost, being seen, you know, is I don't know, it feels really thematic at the same time as it's a very vivid, concrete, real world. You know, going into the corridor when they draw the blind and just staring out, the terrain and the boles of the trees, all the descriptions from the childhood. Maybe just when she says, even if she didn't know, you know, the names, and the names again are great, right? But she would know where she was. I love that. And I maybe wanted to see one detail of what she's actually seeing that then takes us to that one wonderfully vivid childhood. Yeah, great. Who's next? Anyone? No one? This is, yes, Frances. It's wonderful too, because once you read out loud, it kind of like loosens something, and then your next round is going to be even more amazing. So, all right, Frances.
Okay. This is working on something I've already written, just trying to improve. Okay. She could already imagine every danger that could befall Patrick on a winter hunt. His vivid description of the last hunt did nothing to reassure her. She would worry all the while that he was away. How had her mother coped with all the winter hunting trips her husband and sons made up into the icy Catskills? She decided to put a good face on it. She could see that Patrick was already planning what to take as he listened to Sir John. Patrick's eyes wandered around the room. He would sharpen his knife, oil his gun, make up his blanket roll, and lay out his warmest clothes. "When do we leave?" he asked. "I can't wait to put Katie to the test." He had named his new gun after her. Was that good, or was it another reason to be irritated?
That's a great detail. The gun, that's really wonderful. Yeah, so I love the sense of danger right away, right? And her worry, and then you talk about his vivid description of the last hunt, you know, did nothing to sort of calm her fears. And I would just say there, if you could give us again, like one detail, like I asked for from Eileen, right? Like what that detail that like stuck in her craw from that moment, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing I thought, you know, that he's already decided, she can tell from his face that he's already deciding what to take. And then you have great details about what he's already deciding, right? Very vivid. And then right before that, she decides to put a good face on it. Play with switching those. So she's watching his face. She's seeing he's already deciding. She knows what he's thinking about. And then maybe she decides. That causes her, you know, just anyway, see if that works. Yeah, and the gun and her confusion about it all is great.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, one more? Couple more? All right, Felicia, is that your hand in the sky?
Yes, somewhere in the sky. All right, hold on one sec. Going over to it. Jonah, my Scottish man. Let's see. Am I, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Scottish man.
Sorry. I wasn't sure if I was.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. I lost it for a sec. Jonah, my Scottish man, refuses to give a straight answer to any question. No matter how innocuous the query, he meanders from pillar to post, begins before the beginning of recorded time, unwinds a long list of who begat who, reports the weather, recounts every tiny gesture he made, including what he was wearing and whether or not he held a finger aloft so he could guess the direction of the prevailing wind. He then paints a brilliant picture of the sky above him, the thinning of gossamer clouds before the sunshine breaks through. Lovely that, he says, followed by who he passed along the road on his way to me, his latitude and longitude, the troubling fatigue in his legs from pumping the pedals of his bicycle uphill, the same hill he trudged as a teenage boy headed to his first job, apprentice gamekeeper, like his grandfather before him on his father's side, a desire born of the fact he has no desire to be a politician like his father, a losing game, rife with humiliation if one doesn't win, quite unlike the gamekeeper life where one moved with, not against nature. Same rhythm as life, the life of a gamekeeper, regular as the seasons, with sufficient death-defying moments to keep a young man engaged. Survival focuses the mind, he begins to say, before he trails off, a faraway look in his dream, hazy green eyes. Having now lost you, me, the listener, and what I prefer to call the fascinations of ordinary life, paused mid-sentence with me hanging off his last words expectant, he asked, what was the question? This from the man who expects me to trust him, the man who's charmed me no end, the man I love without question.
Beautiful. That's fabulous. I love the setup of that he won't answer a question, or refuses to answer a question, and then we never get to know the question either. And then we go on the whole journey, and the rhythms of, so it's mostly indirect dialogue with these wonderful sprinklings of direct dialogue, and yet the rhythms feel very much like we're on the journey of listening. And I love that. I love that it's through the listener's perspective, and summarized by her, but again, perfectly with the rhythm. So we feel we know him, and then the details are great as the whole thing unspools. And I love that it then builds to her wanting to know what happens next, and then he returns to the question, which he doesn't remember, then what the stakes are for that, right, in the relationship. And yet there's so much humor and love in the whole, kind of wonderful morass of it. So the finger aloft, just the great details, like the hill and the legs hurting and the first job, and then the grandfather and the father, right? Like we really get like this is completely nailed, this whole situation. Yeah. Thank you. All right, anyone else want to go and do that shake it loose thing? No? All right, well then we'll write some more. Okay, so this is Louise Erdrich. The book is Tracks. Speaking of hunting, this is about someone returning from a hunt. All right, here it is. He glowed. Oh, by the way, I keep forgetting, and while I'm remembering, so the chat is a place you are welcome to put your own comments on the work as people read it. Some people feel it's, listening and then listening to me, and it's too many things, and some people really love to do it. So there's no obligation, and I don't think anybody thinks, they're being ignored if you don't put it in the chat. But it's also nice if you're inclined to go ahead and put your specific, honest praise in the chat as people read. So, and and the other thing is people do that. So if you've read aloud, go back and check the chat for that. And you can also save the chat, which I'll remind you at the end, I hope. But at the bottom there on the far right of the place where you would type in a message, there are 3 dots. And if you click on that, a menu will pop up, and the top option is Save Chat. And it will then end up on your desktop, or in your files anyway. But just make sure you get your praise, because it's specific and honest. Okay, back to Louise Erdrich. All right, let me do this. Mute. Okay. He glowed, for the meat strapped to him had frozen a marbled blue. The blood from the moose was flour on his coat and on his face. His features were stiff, the strength in his limbs near exhausted. I freed him from the burden he held to his chest and carried it home in my arms. He followed. I severed the rest from Eli's body and stashed it outside in the lean-to. The meat stood on its own in pieces, a moose transformed into the mold of Eli, an armor that would fit no other. He was stock still, reluctant to move, his mouth dried open as I took him through the door. I took off his clothes, found the piece of saved liver under his arm, and ate it. Then I put a drop of water between his lips, wrapped him in a quilt, and led him near the stove. I removed the kidneys and heart from Eli's pocket and cut them into smaller sections. My hands shook as I prepared the pieces with salt. My mouth watered as I put them in the water, and at the smell of meat roasting, I almost wept. I gave the first cut to Eli, who fell on it gratefully. As I put my share into my mouth as I swallowed it, I felt myself grow solid in the chair. Lit by the burning stove, everything around me sharpened. Thoughts returned. You're my son, I said, moved by the scorched taste. You're my relative. So, yeah, really awesome, powerful writing. And I think one of the things for me that this reminds me of is any moment in a story is going to be a passionate moment in the sense that it's going to matter, because that's why it's being included in the story. Chit chat about what has happened that doesn't matter definitely has its place in human life, but usually because we love the people with whom we are exchanging this and not because it's wildly entertaining. But story is about those moments that change people and those moments where people struggle and those moments where people discover things and learn and grow, and so it's going to have some kind of intensity, and we've seen all these different layers of it, and it's carried in the details and it's carried in the actions. But this my hands shook as I prepared the pieces. My mouth watered. I almost wept. I gave the first cut to Eli, who fell on it gratefully. There's nothing sort of coy about this, right? These are urgencies. These are moments where, raw need and gratitude and hunger and, all of these are really right there at the surface. And then again, these great details. I found the piece of saved liver under his arm and ate it. I mean, that's a certain kind of intimacy, isn't it? So, and the mold that is in the shape of Eli, right, from frozen from his carrying it home. So just, and then this line of dialogue, "You're my son," I said, moved by the scorched taste. You're my relative, right? So something has happened here. And so just thinking about what are those moments where your characters are, what are the heightened moments? What are the transformative moments? What are the moments full of need, full of hunger, full of urgency, that, that we can bring out in the story with the language and with the imagery and with those incredible sensei details. So, and I think, this is a moment of extreme hunger, and here's a moose, right? Here's a frozen moose. So so take a character to one of those extreme moments. See if you can again give us those vivid details that, and so the liver under the arm doesn't sound like delicious automatically, but it kind of reveals the level of the hunger and the need and the desire, right? The fact that it's a little odd, a little disturbing. So again, we're seeing those kind of tensions of opposites pull out some greater meaning. So see what happens on the page when you go for the kind of passion of these intense moments. And let's see, we have about 43 minutes left, so let's do a 12-minute writing. Couple more minutes. Okay, so Denise is having some technical problems, unfortunately. Let me see. All right, I'm gonna check out from here. Okay, I'm just gonna text you or email her. You can just remember you can always call in using a mobile or a landline. And both those numbers are in the the email that I sent before class. Let her know that. Okay. And just let you all know that. So don't forget, there's always the old-fashioned telephone. All right, well, I'm sorry we missed out on her. I'm just gonna go down and just call on the folks who haven't read to the group yet. And let's start with you, Bridget.
Oh, well,
That everybody's screen looks entirely different in terms of the order of people. So Bridget is in my upper left-hand corner, but that is probably not true for everybody.
okay.
Another thing I want to remind everybody who's reading now is that you can read any one of the three that you wrote tonight, but do pick one rather than thinking, oh, I wrote a long scene and reading the whole. So,
well, all right. The other one, I mean, it goes into schoolrooms and nuns and whatnot. So let's do this one instead. He was upon her like a beast. Rage transformed him. She didn't recognize his face as it contorted into a monster. A vampire stepped off the page of the novel that lay on the bedside table, or the gargoyle hunkered on the mantelpiece. She felt herself fleeing through the labyrinths of Gothic cathedrals and the tunnels of dead buried beneath them. He lunged. She was being dragged across the cheap carpet of their rented apartment, dirty from the feet of previous tenants and years of needed replacement. She could remember only the grime of the carpet, nothing of what led to his sudden transformation into something evil, something unknown. As suddenly as he lunged, he let go. She flew from the floor, grabbed the hot frying pan from the stove. She had become the beast. He ran out the door. She would have brained him otherwise.
Wow, I love that sudden flip. I also really love the moment about the carpet. There's sort of, I mean, you have these great, she's lunging and he was upon her, and there's a lot of drama. And then we just go into the grime and the dirt of the carpet, and that's sort of all she notices. And that really literally grounded it for me, right? And I sort of suddenly believed it all, right? I was in, because it was that, I don't know, it was that kind of perfect detail that made the whole scene kind of land. And then I love the turn. I love that there's a sudden turn. Because I was curious, and I call this a reader's question because it's not a problem that readers should have questions as they read. That's what keeps them reading. But I wondered what was the sudden change? And I don't want an answer to what was the sudden change, but you might illuminate that moment more. So that we really experience it. Because when we have a question, it's never a problem unless something's vague for us. So the more you illuminate an unexpected behavior, the more we will just go with it and hold that question as it pulls us through the story. Yeah, great. Lots of energy.
Which change, the one at the beginning or in the middle?
In the middle, when he sees suddenly
he lets go.
After he let her go, right? Again, I don't want you to say because blah blah blah, but how would she know? But I want, is there some sound? Does his face change? What is it? Just even the feeling of his releasing her, something, just if, again, like the carpet, if you give us some detail right there, even though we don't understand it, we will experience it. We will accept it. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, great. Okay, I think Catherine, and you are unmuted, so excellent.
Okay. David lay flat on the cushions, eyes closed, breathing purposefully. Then his breathing grew deeper and slower. His eyelashes began to flicker. The pilot, face heavily bearded, had just opened the helicopter drop, and the countdown had begun. 10, 9, 8. His three buddies, I go into first person. My three buddies and I are scheduled to jump at the end of the countdown. I jump first. Knowing this may be my last mission, depending on our luck and our success. The jungle brush closes in around me. I have my footing. I check my two-way tiny radio to check in with my buddies every 10 minutes. I hope to hear 3 beeps. He stopped breathing. His finger motioned uncertainty. I quietly said, I am with you, David. After about 10 seconds, the breathing continued. And then his body jerked convulsively. Oh my God. I knew not to interrupt him. Then he dissolved in sobs. In a child, a little girl, no older than my own Ella. Then silence. More deep, deep breathing. No, but I must. He turned over on his front.
Wow. All right. So I love the falling asleep and the reading slower and the flicker, right? Like that, just like, oh yeah, that moment. And then we're in a helicopter. So, and so the person, because you switched, I'm a little bit confused, but the person, although I totally get it, we write and we try different things and things come out and then you can fix all that up in editing. But the person who was falling asleep was scheduled to jump first. Is that right? Yeah. So that's like what I call a door. Like I would like a little more of that moment where he's like almost asleep and now he suddenly has to jump out of a helicopter, right? There's just, again, that kind of natural tension of these two very different states. So really interesting. And then the jungle closing around is great and vivid. The tiny radio, he wants to hear 3 beeps. So I feel very compelled by that. And then I got a little bit confused again because because suddenly there was the crying, the needing breathing, and I wasn't sure. I lost track a little bit of where we were, and because I was very hooked by he needs to hear 3 beats. So I still was wondering, did he hear 3 beats, and how is that connected to the
Okay.
crying, right? So, but
May
then I love his rolling over.
You?
What?
I said, may I talk back to you?
Yes, you may.
The piece itself is based on my work with Vietnam vets,
Uh-huh.
vets that were being dropped behind the lines.
Mm.
And their purpose was to take out the gunners. And when they found the gunners, they were 9 and 10-year-old kids that were manning the machine guns, and they had to kill them.
Mm.
And that's just part of the story. Usually the fellow who was the pilot, he was heavily bearded. They were heavily bearded, so they wouldn't see each other.
Mm.
And they wouldn't ever attach, if you like, the ensuing pain to any particular person.
Right.
It just came up, and I figured, oh, well, why not?
Yeah, no, it's powerful. I think there just might be pieces to connect in between, just to, whether if he's having a flashback or if this moment is happening. I just got lost a little bit. And part of it's, hearing it, reading it. It's, so yeah.
All right.
Just take us there. But yeah, fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. So Eleanor and then Jennifer. So.
Okay, so am I unmuted? I am.
You are.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I was delighted to be able to.
If I die, I say, I want you to promise you'll keep having Irene clean every other week. If you let the house go rogue, I'm going to haunt you. Alex is driving us home after shopping. He shoots me a look. You're going to haunt me anyway, he says. I'm serious, I say. Please promise me. And if you decide to sell our condo, buy another one. Don't ever go back to renting. I want to protect him, save him from losing me. I want to be in charge of something, even if it's my afterlife, my absence. I know it's absurd, this need to control, but it's a comforting old friend. After we get home, I stand at the kitchen sink rinsing dishes and stacking the dishwasher. Through the window, I hear wild turkeys approaching, scolding, gobbling. Their bodies are rotund, their wings shiny black as if slicked down with pomade. Their waddles flap in the breeze. About a dozen of them parade across the tree lawn and then along the side of our house. They strut downhill, officious as small-town mares. Look, I say, the vultures are circling. They're going to pick my bones clean. Alex looks alarmed. Kidding, I say, but there's some truth in my little joke. The end of my life flashes in my peripheral vision, a neon sign pulling at my attention. I can't pretend that my life extends indefinitely into some gauzy future.
Fabulous. I love the opening. If I die, it's like, okay, if I die, that it has this sort of portentous, dramatic thing. And it's like, I want you to keep having Irene clean every other week. I love that. It's so just such a human moment. And then and you're going to haunt me anyway. It's like just a beautiful sort of tender exchange. And then I think having given us this vivid experience, we then are willing and it's pleasurable to go into this kind of very cogent analysis of what's going on humanly here, right? I want to be in charge of something. And the idea that the need to control is a comforting old friend. I just love that. That's, again, it's like very human, very, recognizable, but I'm not sure I've seen it articulated, nor have I necessarily articulated it to myself in that way. So I love that combination. I love the officious turkeys being turned into vultures, the idea of the end of my life flashing in my peripheral vision. Just in that kind of character change, I cannot pretend it's, what gauzy continuing or whatever. Anyway, so just great language, really very clear and wonderful. I love the humor and the pathos of it. Really nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Jennifer.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Okay.
Like today, Jim is letting me do my.
She slammed one foot against the back door, grabbed the door handle, and pulled. The car window, a mosaic of tiny pieces held in place, threatened to shatter. She could see him, hands on the steering wheel, head looking straight ahead, seated as if he was on the Sunday drive. He did not move, yet she knew he was alive. She pulled the handle again, then picked up a flat rock and slammed it. I slammed it against the handle at first, and then the car door, and then finally the window. Thousands of pieces cascaded down, making a tinkling sound, a light tinkling sound as they fell. Hands still on the steering wheel, he turned to face her, moving like in a horror movie where the scariest moments happen the slowest. She wasn't sure. He saw her. One deep gash went from his right temple, over his cheekbone, down his cheeks, stopping just before his mouth's edge. It was bleeding. Can you get out of the car? He said nothing. A hissing sound of cold dripping on hot came from the engine, and a plume of smoke was growing near the passenger side. Still he sat, his face facing her, but without recognition of the world or his place in it. She reached in, yanked his hands from the wheel, and pulled his shoulders toward her.
Wow, that is fabulous and very dramatic. You know, this from the slamming of the foot and the mosaic and the shattering, you know, and then in contrast, he could be in a Sunday drive. The one thing she knew he was alive. I wanted to know. Oh, I wanted that visual, whatever the detail was. Oh, and I was curious, and I love the light tinkling sound, but she like breaks the window, which is great. I mean, there's a wonderful build, and we're right there. I was curious which window, and maybe I just missed it, but because again, I'm hearing it out loud, but you know, because that's a decision she has to make, right? And then later to learn that he in fact has this gash, which is that from her breaking the window or is it from the accident? So I had a few little reader questions. Again, not all questions have to be resolved right away, but I felt because she's sort of in her point of view and she's describing this so well, and the contrast, I kind of was curious about her choice or with the window, or whether it was a choice, or maybe, you know, anyway. I love the horror movie where the scariest movements happen the slowest, right? And it does feel like a horror movie, but that commentary really works for me. And then the bleeding gash and the cold dripping on hot and the plume of smoke. I mean, it just gets vivid and keeps building and building, and still he sat. I mean, it's a great suspense, a great example of suspense. Yeah. Woo! Nice. All right, great work, everybody. Really powerful. Good topic, huh? Passion. We got a lot of juice out of that. Remember, you may request topics. So you can just shoot me an email. You can hit reply to the last email I sent you, or you know, that's my email. And feel free to, you know, request things, and they might be something you notice in a book or something you love in a book, or it might be something you're trying to do but struggling with, or that you always have trouble with, or you know, just anything that kind of comes up. I make new classes every time, and it's great to have suggestions. So yeah, this was one. All right, so now transitions. I'm getting suggestions right here. Yeah, we've done some good stuff on transitions, and that is important. Those little moments. All right, I'll put that in a second here. While I'm typing that in, you all can type in your goal for the coming week or 2 weeks, and again, we're going to stay gentle because nothing has changed to make us need less gentleness, and to stay, you know, small, or you can have that reach, you know, like I'm at least going to do this one small thing, and maybe something that feels good, right? Some way that you're feeding your writer self rather than, you know, calling on your writer self to do something strenuous. And you can then have a reach goal if you want, or if you're, you know, if you're excited, like, oh, Frances gets to do research, right? You can say, you know, I get to do this, or I'm hoping to do this larger thing. So go ahead and set a goal for yourself. Oh, and let's remember, simplicity is great because you can remember it, as it might be a Post-it note on your computer screen for remembering. So, all right, I have a little document for my suggestions from students. So, and if you want to put one in the chat, I can add it to my document as well. So while you're putting in goals, I will do that. And again, remember there are notes in the chat on your writing. You'll get the video. I will say, if you write to the video, one, it just runs while I sometimes turn it off while you're off in the breakout rooms, but it runs while you're writing. So you can just actually write, and then you'll hear me say 2 more minutes. And you'll always write something different. So no stepping in the same river twice and all that. Okay, Aline, so my goal is to get the Berlin section done to the point where she gets caught by the Gestapo. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But good, it's sort of, Chekhov's gun on the wall, right? You can't send her as a spy into Berlin in World War II and not ever get caught by the Gestapo. So good.
That's not going to work.
Yeah. All right, Eleanor, finish the next round of revisions on the cancer essay and share it with beta readers for feedback. Identify 3 possible markets. Yeah, I'm thinking about that too. Like, what are good markets for this? It's really just a wonderful piece. So if anybody has, something you read that it would belong in, just from hearing the fragments, a possible guess, go ahead and put that in. Read some poetry and take some walks. Nice. Jennifer, 3 more moments/scenes in my short story and putting together random written scenes into story form. Yeah, wonderful. And that kind of playing with order and story can be so great. I was listening to an interview with Jenny Ophel. That's not how she says it, Ophel or whatever. But anyway, who wrote Weather, which is her new one, and Department of Speculation. They're a little sort of fragmented. They're kind of wonderful. But anyway, there's a picture, I think it's in either the Times or the New Yorker, of her. She has these big boards and all these fragments, and she sort of arranges them. Anyway, so yeah, that should be fun. Catherine, reread The Roundhouse. So we're in a Louise Erdrich mood now. Get some kind of finality on the structure, what to totally omit or include. Nice. Francis, get up and move once in a while. Yes, as I get sucked into reading books and looking for background and historic detail, I can do this sort of thing all day, not always a good idea physically. You can check out audiobooks from the library. And then that's what I do. Then I'm like, because I'm cleaning.
Totally relate.
Listening to audiobooks, yeah. But definitely moving, good, important. Cheryl says, start something, anything. Wonderful. That's an excellent goal. Felicia says, write as much as I want. Yes. Which could mean, I think she's gone, but anyway, it could mean a lot or a little, right? And we don't know. I mean, she probably doesn't know moment to moment. Bridget, keep on keeping at it. Daily writing something new, editing, revising the old with scenes created impromptu. Yeah, good. Just get in there and muck around. All right, Eleanor says, good one. I will plan to set a timer so I also get up and move. That's a really good idea. Those like Pomodoros, right, where you write for 25 and you walk for 5. Or Ellen does sussing, where she does 45 minutes and she walks for 15. No talking, right? Those walks can actually be very productive as well. All right. Oh, Felicia said apologies. Oh, for the last half hour. No, we're only 10 minutes out, so she's not missing as much as she thinks. All right, so yes, Felicia is leading the alternate weeks. Who goes to that? How is that going?
Sometimes.
Yeah, you get some writing done? No, you don't write?
I do, but I don't know. It doesn't have the same punch as our weekly ones, as the ones with you,
right.
To be honest.
Well, they're just different energy, but yeah.
It is.
Oh, right. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all. It was really fabulous.
That was fabulous. Thank you.
It does feel like it takes us away, right? We go to all these different places and all these people doing other things than sitting around their houses, and it's delightful. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much, and I'll I'll put the video in the playlist of tomorrow, and you'll hear from me again. So Take care.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
You.
Bye.